It's an awful pity that Deputy Lawler, maybe he'll be as interested in this issue which affects his constituents and their inability to access their lawful entitlement to an exemption from property tax when they have pyrite, as he is in the welfare of Northern Ireland citizens. And this amendment, and actually these group of amendments, deal with the government's changes to the pyrite exemption, which are better than what was in place, but not good enough. And what my amendments seek to do is to make the government's changes here in this bill a little bit better than that under a number of headings. And I mean, to be honest, I'm a little bit worn out with this issue. We have been discussing it now for really since the property tax itself was introduced. The government's changes, which are good, are the fact that once properties have been included for remediation in the scheme or been done by the insurer or the developer, that they can automatically access their property tax exemption. That's a good thing, but we still have the problem, which is the matter I'm trying to address in Amendment 5, that the Minister has decided that the only properties which gain an exemption at the moment are properties with a damage condition rating of 2 or 1 with progression. And as we've articulated many times here before, there are properties which have damage, which have pyrite, which has either been established by an underground infill test costing the homeowner thousands, or is in an area where we know that pyrite is present, so we can say that given that the damage is there, but that it hasn't developed enough in order to get a damage condition rating of 1 with progression. Now, essentially that means that that property is still valueless. It's even nearly worse than valueless. They can't decorate it, they can't extend it, and they can't sell it, and yet they can't still gain access to their lawful pyrite exemption because you've set the bar too high in terms of damage. And what my Amendment 5 seeks to do, that where damage is present that they should be able to avail of this exemption if the area has pyrite or tests have been carried out or whatever. I think the other groups of amendments try to address, I think the Revenue Commissioners, in the way in which it's worded now, may ask for any number of items to support the application for the exemption. To my mind, the way it's worded, by not having "or" down in it, that it could read that they have to ask for all of that full list of items. And what I'm seeking to do there is, obviously they'll need the address, but other than the address, one of the items should be enough in order to gain the access, and that's what Amendments 6 and 7 seek to do. It's sort of making it absolutely clear that the Revenue Commissioners won't come looking for a ridiculous amount, which I would think is what the government would want. So I would imagine that that could be accepted. The other area really is in relation to Amendment 8, and that's about the duration of the exemption. Now, I note and I very much welcome the fact that the government have increased the exemption to a period of 6 years for properties which have serious damage. That's a very good thing, but it still doesn't deal with the other category of people. So if a house has a BCA rating of 2, has been included in the scheme and has been remediated, it'll get the exemption for 6 years, which I very much welcome. But look at the bigger pool of people, those who haven't been included in the scheme, who haven't been remediated, who don't have a BCA of 2, those people still have a valueless property. And my amendment here, which I think is actually critical, if they have damage in a pyrite area, they should be exempt, to my mind, indefinitely until the property is remediated or a green certificate has been issued. Because unless one of those criteria has been met, the property remains valueless and we're levying a tax on it. So I actually think it's critical. So the group of amendments are linked. They're kind of trying to achieve the same thing. They're trying to incorporate that significant group of property owners who have pyrite, whose property is valueless, but who still, even with the changes that the government is putting forward, can't access their lawful exemption. Would that were so, but sadly some of the reason for putting this down has been the bitter experience of homeowners who have found a total inconsistency in terms of the approach of revenue on these matters, which was why I took the precaution of putting it in. And I actually think it is quite important, because The provisions that are there, for example, it should be perfectly easy for revenue to know which estates and which general areas are affected by pyrite and which aren't, and measures like this. And I think it leaves too much scope for them to be onerous in their request, which is not good for them and certainly not good for the homeowner. You see, I suppose the problem is dependent on what way you look at this issue, and it's clear that the government are looking at it from the point of view of limiting the exemptions, whereas I'm looking at it from the point of view that anybody with a dwelling in these areas with pyrite essentially has a valueless property. And you know, you can say, and the reason for the problem with the original legislation was the government was making it far too onerous for homeowners to prove pyrite at a prohibitive cost. So we've removed it now, largely underfloor testing, which costs thousands. But that's not really good enough. If you're in an area and your house has damage, and your neighbour's house has damage and been included, and the person around the corner, and hundreds of houses, but yours hasn't got damage enough, you know, if it looks like a dog, if it barks, chances are it is pyrite. You know, obviously if somebody comes in from Tipperary or somewhere where there's no pyrite and chances there are, revenue are going to say move along there now, but the symptoms are clear. There's engineers in these areas, there's, you know, tens of thousands of houses. It's not that huge, so the presence of pyrite is an important barometer, and I don't think there's enough consistency there in Revenue's approach in terms of self-assessment and so on. So I actually think it's critical, because there are properties, say for example, where we know for a fact that they have pyrite, so there's no question that whether they have pyrite or not. It's been established that they have pyrite, but the damage isn't bad enough yet, and that's why we need to have this amendment here. And I will be present at Cathaoirleach, because there's a category of people whose backs are to the wall on this, and I think they're actually in the worst category, and it should be the case. And we need to be building a remediation process that gives people closure, that they get certification or remediation, because there's no other way of restoring the value in their property, and until they do that, then they need to be exempt from the charge.